Hey, Tyson here from Refuge Church in Lenoir City, Tennessee. Thank you for listening to our message today. Refuge Church is a family of faith sent to proclaim hope in Jesus Christ through relationships. For more resources and information about Refuge, please visit us on the web at refugeph.com.
All right. We've been spending a little time in the Psalms before we look to the fall, where we're going to go through the book of James. A couple of things I want to say before we get started with the sermon. Next week's going to be kind of special because we're going to have a baptism service. And it's not going to be here. We're going to go to the lake and see 3 people baptized next week after the service. So we're going to have service here, then we're going to drive over to Melton Hill Lake, and we're going to see some children who are going to profess their faith publicly in baptism. So if you're a person who says, listen, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, I've never been baptized, but you want to get baptized, maybe this is your time. If you say, hey, I don't want to get baptized in the lake, I got that. We can fill this thing up back here too. They make new water every day. We'll fill it up. So if that's you, we'll fill it up, all right? So we've been talking about Psalms. Last week we talked about Psalm 110. It was a messianic psalm. It was a psalm that pointed to Jesus. It was a psalm of victory, and here was the idea behind last week's message, if you didn't hear it, but it was about Jesus, who is not only our king, but our high priest, right? In the Jewish culture, there were 2 people that were held above all other. There was the king, and then there was the high priest. The king ruled, the high priest made atonement for sins, which is important. Well, Jesus fulfilled both of those roles, and last week what we looked at is the importance of Jesus as our high priest. The idea that in the Old Testament we see these sacrifices that went on. They atone for the sins of people by sacrificing a lamb. And we asked the question, why don't we do that today? Well, thank goodness we don't do that today, right? And the reason we don't do that today is because Jesus, the new high priest, the great high priest, laid down his own life. He was the perfect lamb. If you remember John the Baptist, when he saw Jesus, he said, behold Jesus, the Lamb of God, who forgives the sins of the world. This Jesus, the high priest, laid his own life down for our sins. So imagine the Old Testament. Imagine a high priest who has brought this lamb, and he atones for your sin with this lamb. Jesus says, no, I'm going to lay my own life down. That's how much Jesus loves us, right? This is the idea of victory for us, right? This idea that we're no longer a slave to fear. The song we just sang, because our trust is in the sacrifice that Jesus laid down for us. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, about the idea of fear, in that we don't have to earn God's favor. Right? If we fear God as Christians, it's because we think we have to earn his favor, that we have to be good enough. Well, we're going to see that's not the case. If you're a guest with us today, we want you to follow along with us. We're going to be in Psalm 37 and Isaiah 55. You can follow along with us in our sermon notes by texting the word visit to 865-276-8686. That number should be on the screen. Text that word to that. You'll get a little link. Fill that out. You'll be sent a link to our sermon notes, all right? If you're a regular with Refuge and you didn't get text messages this week about providing food, you need to text the word refuge to that same number, and you'll be in our announcement group, and you'll get that. Now, we don't send out a ton of text. Probably 3 went out this week, and it's not a group text where you see everybody's reply with a thumbs up. You know, it's not one of those. Only I get the response, so it's fine. Anyway, all right, so now, Psalm. We've been talking about Psalms. Today we're going to be in Psalm 37, and here's what I want us to think about. I want you to think about the word delight. It's not a word we use a lot, right? Delight. I think maybe women use it some. Oh, that's a delight. But men, it's not really well, that was a delightful song, TC. That was delightful. But the idea of delight is great pleasure or happiness or joy. That's the idea behind this word delight. And we're going to look at this word delight in regards to what it means to be a Christian. I think it's important for us to think about that. There are a lot of things that we do in life that are not delightful. Tomorrow your alarm clock's going to go off, and you're going to go to work. Now, you may not hate your job, but would you call it a delight? It's probably not a delight, right? It's something that you have to do. I'm laughing with you. I got to go to work tomorrow too. But it's not a delight. There are things that we do that are not a delight. Kids, you know what's fixing to happen? Parents, to this may be a delight. But for kids, you're about to go to school. Not a delight. No more sleeping till noon or later. You got to get up. You got to go to school. There's a means to an end there, right? You're trying to earn an education. We go to work to earn a living, to earn a paycheck, to be able to survive. Maybe you don't like weed eating, whatever it is. There are a lot of things that we do in life that we don't enjoy, but we do them. They're not a delight. Well, we're going to talk about some things that are delightful here later. What a friend of mine, what we call these things that we do that are not delight, we call it taking the stairs. Right? There's no elevator to the top. You got to take the stairs. Sometimes you got to take the stairs, and that's what you do when you go to work. You take the stairs. Nobody delights in taking the stairs. But what we're going to see today as we look at God's Word is there is some delight in here for us, and I want us to see what that means to us. And what I want us to be thankful or thinking about is this. If we're not careful, we can make Christianity about taking the stairs. You think about this. All those things that I talked about earlier that are not necessarily delightful, but things that we do. You know what the common theme about those are? Right? We earn a paycheck. We earn an education. We're doing something for something in return. We're earning it. And if we're not careful, we'll make Christianity that way where we try to earn God's favor. And then here's what happens if we live life that way. If we think we have to earn God's favor, guess what? Christianity becomes taking the stairs. Well, I have to go to church today. Well, I have to do my quiet time today. Well, I have to serve in whatever today. It becomes taking the stairs. But what I want to show you today is that's not what Christianity is about. It's not about trying to earn God's favor. Quite honestly, we can't earn God's favor. That's what Jesus Christ did for us. So we're going to look at that, right? I want us to look at how we avoid the stairs in Christianity. I want us to look at what the other side of Christianity is, what true Christianity is about. So we're going to be in Psalm 37. Look at Psalm 37, verse 1. It says, "Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb." Now here's David. This is a psalm of David. This is why I think psalms are important. This is why we're preaching on psalms. I think it's important for us in our devotional time, in our quiet time, to read psalms. And it's important because David wrote most of them, and David is considered a man after God's own heart. And when we read the Psalms, what we're seeing is David being truly honest with God. And that's what our relationship is like. Some days he's praising God. Some days he's asking God, "Where are you?" It's this honesty behind David. And here's David, and he's looking out over the world, and he says, this is what he says. He says, "Fret not yourself because of evildoers, and be not envious or jealous of wrongdoers." The word fret there means to be angry. So here's what David is seeing. He's seeing people who are doing evil, who are doing opposite of what God has called them to do, and they're prospering. Or else he wouldn't use the word envy. That they have things. He is envying things, or we have a tendency to envy things that people have. And I'll be honest with you, that's true in the world today. There are people who reject God totally, and they're successful in life. And we as Christians, we're over here doing our best. We're not stealing from the man. We're not sticking it to the man. We're doing what we're called to do, and we're not as successful as them. And sometimes we get envious. We begin to look at the things that they have. And he's saying, listen, don't get angry over those things. He says, "For they will soon fade like grass and wither like the green herb." He says, listen, ultimately justice will be served. That's not our problem as Christians. But see, here's the thing, and this teaches us something about life for us today. Life here on earth is not going to be fair. There are going to be people who prosper who are doing wrong, and there are going to be people who prosper who are doing right. There are going to be people who fall when they do wrong, and there are going to be people who are right who struggle. right? Life is not fair. You can't earn that a lot of times, right? So he's saying, listen, don't be focused on those things. Do not fret those things. We become anxious about the things of this world is really what he's focusing on. Now look at verse 3. Here's how we combat that. Trust in the Lord. Trust. This word trust. We spent several weeks talking about this word faith. That's what this is. Confidence or hope in a person. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. And then here's our word. Delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. So he says, listen, these two verses, verse 3 and 4, are in complete contrast to 1 and 2. You see that the world, you see that they're doing wrong, but they're still prospering. He says, listen, don't be fretful about that. Don't be jealous of that. You do what is good. He says, do good and dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. He says, listen, I want you to be faithful. I want you to trust the Lord and be faithful and do what is right. And then here's verse 4. Delight or be happy, take pleasure in the Lord. Find your enjoyment yourself in the Lord, and then he will give you the desires of your heart. So he's telling us as Christians, as followers of Jesus Christ, that our happiness and our contentment is not found in the things of this world. They're found in our relationship with God, the creator of the universe, the one who spoke this world into existence. That's where we find our enjoyment. So here's what happens, right? We get anxious, quite honestly, we get anxious about things of this world. You think about the things that make you anxious, and it's things of this world. And he says, listen, I don't want you to focus on the things of this world. I want you to put your trust in God. Don't trust in the things of this world. They will let you down. Trust in God. So it's where our focus is, right? And we focus in that delightment in God. We lack contentment when we fret over those things. So here's my question. In the Christian walk, we look at verse 4, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Does that sound like the stairs to you? Doesn't sound like the stairs to me. Doesn't sound like I got to rise up and grind tomorrow, right, and do my quiet time, and I got to go to church. I got to do these things. He says, listen, I want you to delight in the Lord. See, there are things where we find contentment. I'll talk about those in a moment. And when we find contentment in those things, it lasts forever. That's one of the things that he's talking about. So this idea that we're focused on the wrong things. So this is what the plan is for Christianity, and it has been forever, is that we find delight or contentment in God. So here's my next question. Why do we fret over the things of this world? Because let's be honest, that's what causes most of our grief is the things of this world. We fret over the things of this world because we don't trust God. Now, I do know that there are people in our church family who are going through tragic things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't fret over those things when the doctor calls and you get that diagnosis or for that family member. I'm not talking about that. I'll talk about that in a moment. But the other things that we fret about, the things of this world, he says, listen, don't focus on those things. Focus on God. Let God be God. Have trust in him. Have faith in him. This is what it means to live by faith. It's to do good. It's to be faithful, not to earn his favor, but to do what he's called us to do and to delight in him. And then he will give us the desires or the petitions or the things that we ask for in our heart. Guess what? Think about this. When God is the delight of your heart, he'll give you the things you ask for that bring you delight. He'll give you more of himself. That's really what this verse is saying. So, let's look down at verse 5. He says, okay, commit your way to the Lord and trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as a light and your justice as noonday. Remember, these people are looking at the world and they're seeing people prosper that shouldn't be. And he says, listen, don't you worry about justice. There will be justice for you. Verse 7, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, or over the man who carries out his evil devices. He says, listen, there are times when you get anxious, you fret, begin to fret about those things. What does he say here? He says, be still before the Lord. If you're anxious, if you're worried about things of this world, take time and be still before the Lord. Worship is important, I think, for all of us. I think it's good sometimes if you're anxious to sit down and just worship God. Play your favorite worship song. Open your Bible. Read a psalm. Read these psalms of David and understand what God has done for us. And it will release that anxiety that we have. Verse 8, he says, refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself. It tends only to evil. See, if we let this anxiousness get to us, this fretting over people being successful that shouldn't be, it leads us to do evil. We either say, well, if they're going to get away with it, I'm going to get away with it. Or we get mad or whatever it is. He says, listen, don't focus on those things. Focus on God. Jump down to verse 23. He says, the steps of a man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. He says, listen, God will lead you. God will take every step that you take when you delight in him, when he is your delight. Now look at the next part of this, verse 24. Though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. I think David puts this verse in here for this reason. We know that following God is not easy. It doesn't mean life is going to be great. Some of you know that right now. You're living through that right now with stuff that you're going through. And this is what he says. Though you fall, even though you've committed your way to the Lord, even though it's established by the Lord, you will stumble. You will go through life and it will throw you things that will cause you to stumble. And he says, listen, though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. Here's what David is saying to this. Whenever you go through whatever it is you're going through, the Lord will hold your hand. He will lift you up. He will keep you from falling. Although it may be hard, and although it may include taking the stairs sometimes, we will not fall. He will lift up our hand. So now, we talked about earlier the things that we don't delight in. We don't delight in going to work. Some of you may. You're weird, but some of you may. You may not delight in going to school. Some kids do. They may be weird too, probably not. They're going to be smart. They're going to make more money than all of us probably. But there are things that we don't delight in that we do, that we take the stairs. But there are things that we do delight in. Even people who are not Christians, they delight in things. People they find delight in marriage, right? This is sort of a separate example, and here's why I use this as a separate example, because these other examples that I'm going to talk about are temporary, but marriage is meant to be permanent. And the reason marriage is different is because God is teaching us something through marriage, that delight is meant to be eternal, right? Forever. That it's supposed to last, and that's the idea. We find delight in accomplishments, right? If you work hard, you take the stairs at work and you work hard and you accomplish something, you get the promotion or you get recognition, you find delight in that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. You've earned it. You've worked for it. When you buy things, think about it. When you buy things, it brings you delight, right? Women, new pair of shoes. You know, you got 65 pair. But you get another pair of shoes and you're like, this is great. Right? Guys, I don't know what it is, a tool or whatever it is. Whatever it is that brings you delight. Golf club, I don't know. But we find delight in these things. And see, online people, salesmen, they've figured this out. Because you think about it. You know why we buy online? You can buy one thing, but you get twice the enjoyment. You get delight when you press buy. Then you get delight when it shows up in the mailbox. You get double the delight, right? And we love it. But guess what happens when you get that new pair of shoes? 3 weeks later, you walk through a mud puddle and you get mud on it. You're like, got to have some more delight. Got to have 61 pairs of shoes. Right, guys, we get a new car or whatever it is. Nothing wrong with finding delight in a new car. And we're like, man, this is great. And then 3 weeks later, you come home and there's a door ding on it. And you're like, man, I can't have anything good. And then the delight wears off, and now all you got's a payment, right? And we find delight in things, and there's nothing wrong with those things. Food is meant to be a delight. We're getting ready to eat, and it's going to be good. But you know what's going to happen about 5:30, 6 o'clock? You're going to be hungry again. No matter how good it is. Think about the greatest meal you've ever had. You were still hungry about 4 hours later, were you not? And see, here's the thing about this world, and God is teaching us something about this in the world today, is that the things of this world, go back to Psalm 37, those things that we fret about, that we see other people succeeding about, they're succeeding and delighting in things that don't last. And we find delight in things that don't last. You get a new phone, they come out with a new model 3 days later, and you're like, oh my gosh. It can take pictures backwards and upside down. I got to have that. Right? We find delight in things, but it fades. You know why that is? God is teaching us something. He's teaching us something about this world. And He's teaching us this, that it doesn't satisfy. That there's something greater for us. That God intended something greater for us. So here's what happens when we settle for things that we find delight in here on earth. There's nothing wrong with finding delight in those things. It's not going to last, but we find delight in those. Here's what happens when we do that. We want more, so we buy more. That's the reason we have 65 pairs of shoes, and we have 28 fishing rods, and we have 7 sets of golf clubs. Listen, these are things that my own life I have, right? I got more than 27 fishing rods, by the way, Avery. But here's the thing. We think that these things will fulfill us, and here's what happens. This is how we end up having people who are addicted, right? They find temporary delight, and they want it again and again and again. And the truth be known, we're all addicted to something. We're all addicted. Is that my phone? It's not my phone. We're all addicted to something. We all desire to find delight for eternity, and we try to find it in things that are temporary, and it ends up costing us all the time. But see, God's yelling, there's something greater. There's something that lasts, and marriage is a picture of it. But I want you to see this in Isaiah 55, verse 1. This is what this is God's invitation to His people. This is what He says. He says, "Come, everyone who thirsts. Come to the waters, and he who has no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk with money and without price." He says, "Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy?" He says, "Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourself in rich food." Now, He's going to tell us in verse 3 to come to me. He's talking about coming to God. And here's what He's saying. We find eternal satisfaction when we try to find delight in God. He says, listen, come to me. You remember when in John chapter 4, He goes to the woman at the well and He says, "From me you will find living water, and if you drink of it, you will never thirst again." And that's His idea here in Isaiah chapter 55. He says, listen, we find our satisfaction in God, and it doesn't cost you money. When you give here, you're not earning God's favor. I've been dealing with atheists on Twitter, and one of the biggest things they have is, well, they just want my money. Listen, if you're here and you don't believe in God and you think we want your money, don't ever give. If that's your hang-up, don't ever give, and you watch how this church treats you. It will not treat you any different. I don't know who gives and who doesn't. Nobody does except for one person. Nobody. You will not be treated any different because God doesn't treat us any different. He says, listen, you can come and buy and have a relationship with God, and it doesn't cost you anything. It cost Him everything. It cost His Son. That's the reason Jesus was the Lamb that died for us, so that we could have all of God that we want and without a price. We don't have to earn it. Right? We go back to those ideas of the things that we do that we don't enjoy, that we don't find delight in. The reason we don't find delight in them is because we have to earn it. You don't have to earn your Christianity. It's not something that you have to do. It's something that we get to do. We find satisfaction in Him. And he says, listen, I want you to eat what is good. God is the food that lasts. He will satisfy. Look at verse 3. He says, incline your ear and come to me. Hear that your soul may live, and I will make you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. He said, behold, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and a commander to the peoples. Behold, you shall call a nation that you did not know, and a nation that you did not know shall run to you, because the Lord your God and the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. Verse 6, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and our God, for he will abundantly pardon. I'm going to ask TC and the band to come up here, because here's what I want us to think about. Here's what the invitation is for the people of God that God is giving them. He said, listen, come to me, what satisfies eternally. If we try to find satisfaction in this world, guess what? You're going to have to get up tomorrow and earn it again. And you're going to have to get up the next day and earn it again. And you're going to have to get up the next day and earn it again. But God says, listen, if we come to him and we find satisfaction in him, it lasts forever. We should trust in God. We should feast on God. We should find satisfaction in him. So here's what I want us to do today. Delight should lead to worship. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to sing and we're going to worship and we're going to delight in God. That's what worship is we're showing him how much enjoyment we find in him and what he's done for us. That's step one for those of us who are Christians. We're going to delight in him. We're going to show that God is what we need, that God is what we desire. God is who we trust. Today when we eat together, before we eat, we will partake of the Lord's Supper. We will take the bread and the wine. It's not wine, it's juice. I grew up Baptist. Right? So we're going to partake of his body and his blood. And part of the symbolism of the Lord's Supper is that we're going to eat hamburgers and hot dogs. And guess what? About 5 o'clock, you're going to be hungry. For me, it's about 3 o'clock. But this idea of the Lord's Supper is this, is that God, when we find delight in you, it lasts forever. His body broken for us, his blood shed for us, it lasts forever. I don't have to wake up again tomorrow and earn it. I didn't have to wake up today and earn it. I didn't earn it anyway. Jesus Christ did. It's eternal. And lastly is this. Maybe you're here and you don't have a relationship with God. His invitation in verse 55 or chapter 55 was, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Return to the Lord and he will abundantly pardon. God's willing to forgive you of everything you've ever done. Forsaking him, whatever you've ever done, God is willing to abundantly pardon you. God's work has already been done in Jesus Christ through the cross. You can come to him today and have a relationship with him. So I want us to stand. I want us to sing, to delight in God. And if you're here and you want to have a relationship with God, I'll be glad to talk with you. If you want to come down and pray, you can do that. I know a lot of people have got a lot of things going on in their lives right now. This altar's always open. An altar's a place where we can lay things down to God and say, God, I'm anxious over this. I fret over this. I'm going to give it to you. So let's worship.
Thank you for listening to this message today, brought to you by Refuge Church. Please visit our website for more resources as well as our YouTube channel. Just search for Refuge Church in Lenore City, Tennessee to find us. We hope that this message has helped you find hope in Jesus Christ.